In 2017, after several years of lackluster sales and declining profits, Nintendo became king of the gaming world again, thanks to the surprising popularity enjoyed by their handheld and console hybrid, the Switch. But later in that same year, the company had another somewhat unexpected success on their hands, the Nintendo Classic Mini family computer, known as the NES Classic in North America. A tiny replica of the iconic console packed with a region-tailored library of 30 of the system's greatest titles, playable over HDMI connections for easy setup and crisp, clean display on modern televisions. Though in all honesty, the Classic Mini is little more than a glorified emulation box. It's a fun product that was a big hit with Nintendo fans, young and old. Mostly old. And initial batches of the system sold out very quickly, making them hard to find collectibles for quite some time. Due to the success of Nintendo's 8-bit themed plug-and-play, a Super Famicom and SNES edition hit the market about a year later and was equally as well received. The overwhelming financial success of these two novelty consoles pretty much guaranteed a third in the Classic Mini line, and on July 7th, 2018, it was released in Japan. The natural next step and follow-up, a gold special edition of the Famicom Mini celebrating the 50th anniversary of legendary manga publication Weekly Shonen Jump, of course. Wait, what? While this new addition to the Classic Mini family might cause a few people to scratch their heads asking why at first, when you take into consideration how closely manga and video games are tied together in Japan, as well as how much of a powerhouse Weekly Shonen Jump is in the world of popular culture, this limited edition Famicom Mini starts to make a whole lot of sense. Over its 50-year history, Shukan Shonen Jump, as it's called in its native country, is responsible for publishing some of the most popular comic series in the world: Dragon Ball, Fist of the North Star, Naruto, One Piece. It's a company that can almost be likened to a Marvel or a DC in its size and influence on the comics industry in Japan. Though it debuted in the late 1960s, Weekly Shonen Jump really hit its stride in the 1980s, right around the time when the Famicom became the hottest video game platform in Japan. So naturally, dozens of licensed games based on the manga publication's IPs flooded the market. This golden limited edition of the Classic Mini Famicom is packed with a selection of 20 of those titles, ones that kids in Japan in the 80s and 90s grew up with and surely have fond memories of today. Quality be damned. Anyway, from here on out, I'll do an off-the-cuff first-time unboxing of the system, as well as a more structured look into each of the games inside. I hope you enjoy. Okay, here's the actual box itself for the Shonen Jump 50th Anniversary Classic Mini Famicom. And as you can see over here, it's got Son Goku from Dragon Ball Z or Dragon Ball holding onto the gold little Famicom Mini. Some other different characters here, I think some from, there's Kenshiro, there's Captain Tsubasa, Magical Taruruto-kun, Kinnikuman. Over here at the top, they got a little bit of some of the series that these things, some of the games come from. Captain Tsubasa, Rokurenashi Blues, advertising Dragon Quest, and the 20th Anniversary Jump, I guess it was an action RPG. Densetsu wa kokokara hajimatta, I think that's the starting screen from Dragon Quest, The Legend Begins Here. Special gold version, and yeah, the 50th Anniversary Nintendo Classic Mini Family Computer Jump. And yeah, 20 popular titles in there. What you'll notice for this package is it's a lot different from maybe the NES Classic or the Famicom, the Nintendo Classic Mini, which here's the box to compare. And of course this and like the Super Famicom Super NES edition, they were modeled to look just like the original boxes. But of course this never got released until now, so instead of being modeled after a game box, it's actually modeled after one of its publications. So pretend like it's like a little book here. And actually very, very accurate, very faithful replication. And just to kind of show how close they are, I got the latest edition of Weekly Shonen Jump to compare. So size is right over there. Here's the spines. Looks very much the same. Little advertisement for Grand Blue Fantasy. This is the back of the box here. We'll take a look at that in a sec. But yeah, even like the paper on the sides, pretty faithful with the colors and everything. Let me go, little guy over here, and asking me to buy things. I guess that's the little jump mark. As far as in the back, just a little bit of a selection of the games and HDMI. Nothing too special. We'll take a look at the games in a minute, but let's open this up And actually, they had to open it up in the store once because, well, you'll see in a second. But this is my first time opening it myself. And here's why they had to open it. In Japan, they have these little kind of insurance cards, and they have to like stamp or put a sticker for the what do you call it, the store that you bought it at. But we'll take a look at this real quick. It's the most boring, least interesting part, but it looks pretty bare bones if this is the instruction manual. But here, got this at Seagull near my house. Okay, service thing, and well, not very not a very involved or detailed instruction manual. But that's one thing there. Looks like you got HDMI cables. Got your USB cables, which the Famicom Minis and Super Famicom Minis did not come with the actual AC adapter. You have to actually buy an adapter itself, but I think there are a few things that you could actually use it for. I think like the Switch AC adapter also works with this. It's a simple USB thing. And here's the actual system itself. This is just exactly how it came with the regular mini Famicom, but you can tell it's already gold. So let's pull these out real quick. No controllers. And you'll probably notice that because the original Famicom, the controllers were attached to the system, they had to keep the size of the controllers the same scale as a system. So they're very, very tiny controllers. You don't have that nice regular size controller like the European and North American NES models got. And here's the actual system itself. Kind of a bit of a matte gold. It's actually kind of nice. Ooh, a little loud over there. It doesn't come out. Power button, I guess. Yeah, there you go. Reset. This doesn't do anything. You see that it's pretty much the same, but family computer. Got the little jump mark over there. And let's see if we could pop these controllers on the side. This is number 2, so they're getting tangled. Pop that on the side. So there you go. It's a little Famicom Gold Edition for the 50th anniversary of Jump. On the back, you got a HDMI and USB. And let's take a look real quick at the standard Famicom version. Just to kind of compare and contrast. And yeah, that's about it. Doesn't look like there's anything too drastically different. I mean, slightly aside from the color. And yeah, taking a look at the back. Well, it's pretty much the same thing as far as I can tell. HDMI logo, DC in, HDMI out. Bottom, made in China. And then here's the standard edition. So yeah, not much has changed between either of these. But okay, now that's done looking at the actual box itself, I'll take a look at the games. The game selection screen in the Shonen Jump edition of the Famicom Mini is set up just like the standard version, allowing you to scroll left and right between titles, and choose from options such as adjusting the aspect ratio, adding scan lines, continuing from save states, etc. However, there is no rewind feature here like in the Super Famicom Mini. Also like the original, remaining idle for too long at this screen will play a little cutscene, but of course this time it's Shonen Jump themed. By default, the games are arranged in Gojuon, the Japanese alphabetical order, but you can arrange titles according to other criteria such as by publisher, playtime, and more. Sadly, there's no original theme for this release, and it just cycles through a few songs from a handful of the featured games. Sticking to the Japanese alphabetical arrangement, I'll provide a very brief overview and thoughts for each, as there's no need to go into too much detail as information for these games are all over the net, and a few of them are already very well known. Anyway, let's begin. The first game in the library is the Japanese exclusive Ankoku Shinwa Yamato Takeru Densetsu, or Dark Myth, The Legend of Takeru Yamato, published in 1989 by Tokyo Shoseki. It's primarily a menu-based graphic adventure game that also features simple side-scrolling action boss fights at the conclusion of a chapter. There are some really nice looking sprites in this game, and although I didn't spend much time with this before moving on, I enjoyed it and will likely come back for more in the future. Next up is Captain Tsubasa, a 1988 soccer game that's quite unique for a sports title. Rather than focusing on real-time action, Tecmo instead blended role-playing and strategy elements into a game that's highly cinematic, and surprisingly very entertaining. The graphics are nice and clean, and the music is great, especially when the opposing team is in possession of the ball. Captain Tsubasa is pretty cool, and Tecmo knew it, so it did get a release outside of Japan. However, the license was dropped, the game renamed to Tecmo Cup, and many elements of the source were radically changed in localization. Tecmo's 1990 follow-up to this game, Captain Tsubasa Volume 2 Super Striker, is also included in the Jump Famicom Mini, and plays much like its predecessor, though with a new storyline, enhanced graphics, and some new extra gameplay features, including a very useful real-time view of the field. The cinematics in the sequel have been ramped up significantly, making this one even more exciting, an impressive feat for a game where you're mostly just selecting different commands to perform. Unlike the first game, Captain Tsubasa Volume 2 never got released outside of Japan, and it's well worth playing for fans of the original. The next game here is the only Famicom disc title included, which is Kinnikuman, Kinniku-sei Sōdatsusen, or Kinnikuman, Fight for the Throne of Planet Kinniku, published by Bandai back in 1987. This game is a typical side-scrolling brawler where you can kick and punch your foes, jump around, and confront a boss at the end of the stage. There's not really much more to say. It's not particularly nice to look at, the music is repetitive, and the hit detection is a bit wonky. Games like this were a dime a dozen back in the 80s. At least you can choose different characters to play as. Another game from this series is also on the Shonen Jump Famicom Mini, which is Kinnikuman Muscle Tag Match from 1985, also made by Bandai. While the previous title was Japan only, this one made its way to North America as Tag Team Match, Muscle. It's a straight up tag team wrestling game, and one of only 3 titles in this collection that allows for 2-player play. Muscle Tag Match is incredibly simple, and kinda feels like an early fighting game. It's very dated, but can be fun, at least in small bursts, and preferably with a friend. After the Kinnikuman games, there's another Japanese exclusive from Bandai, Sakigake, Otokojuku Shippū Ichigosei, which can be loosely interpreted as Charge, Men's Private School, #1 Student. A very manly 1988 beat-em-up where you kick and punch your way through countless faceless street toughs to take on a level boss and repeat the process. You can play as 4 different characters, but regardless of who you choose, he'll be represented by the same generic model of a shirtless guy during the lead up to the boss. When you get to the boss, not only does the character model change to reflect the chosen hero, but you get to finally use the character's unique fighting style, and you're no longer restricted to moving just left and right on a single plane. While it's pretty basic and a bit rough around the edges, for an early beat-em-up, Sakigake Ōtokojuku isn't too bad. The 2 games that follow this brawler are a pair of RPGs from Bandai based on the Saint Seiya series, Saint Seiya Ōgon Densetsu, or Gold Legend, released only in Japan in 1987, and Saint Seiya Ōgon Densetsu Kanketsu-hen, or Gold Legend Final, which came out the following year and eventually got a European release as well. Despite the very similar names, both games are quite different from one another, providing 2 separate narratives and really interesting atypical battle systems. The first game emphasizes non-linear exploration and features a 2-player versus mode, while the second is single-player only and a bit more straightforward and structured. I enjoyed plain old Ōgon Densetsu more than its sequel, and spent quite a bit of time with it. Sekiryūō, which means Red Dragon King, is a menu-based graphic adventure much like the previously talked about Dark Myth, but minus the action bits. Published by Sunsoft in 1989, it tells a fictional tale that takes place in real ancient China, and like a lot of adventure games from the time, your choices in this game can have some pretty fatal consequences. Yikes. This isn't the only game in the Shonen Jump Famicom Mini with an ancient Chinese backdrop, since the next to be featured is the 1989 Capcom strategy RPG, The Devouring of Heaven and Earth, more commonly known by its Japanese name, Tenshio Kurao. Set in the highly romanticized and perhaps overexploited Three Kingdoms period, the player takes control of the leaders of the Shu Kingdom with the goal to unite China. It's a pretty interesting game, and while I don't enjoy it as much as Capcom's excellent beat-em-up using the same license, this is one I'll come back to for sure. Red Dragon King understandably never got an international release, but Tenshio Kurao was localized for North America and renamed Destiny of an Emperor in 1990. The next game in this little console is perhaps the biggest of them all, NX's groundbreaking 1986 role-playing classic, Dragon Quest. Since it's the most well-known game in the batch, and has been released and re-released all over the world, there's not much I need to say about it, other than mention that there was a Dragon Quest themed manga published in Weekly Shonen Jump called Dai no Daibouken, or Dai's Great Adventure, and that's probably why this game was included here. Even though this RPG is very much a product of the era and a bit tough to play through today, I spent way more time than I should have getting caught up in the simple delights of its hypnotic grindfest. After Dragon Quest is Dragon Ball, Shendo no Nazo, aka The Mystery of Shenlong, a 1986 action-adventure game from, you guessed it, Bandai once again. This is another game that got a heavily altered localization job that ditched the license, this time in the form of Dragon Power, which is well known out there, mostly for how bad it is. There are 2 more Dragon Ball games included with the Shonen Jump Famicom Mini, the Japan exclusives Dragon Ball Gokuden and Dragon Ball Z Kyoshu Saiyajin, the story of Goku and Attack of the Saiyans, released in 1989 and 1990 respectively. Both are card-based role-playing games, though Story of Goku plays out more like a board and adventure game hybrid, and Attack takes place on a grid-based map. In my opinion, although there are some nice visuals in each, both of these titles are a bit lacking, probably due to the card game mechanics, and it wouldn't be until the 16-bit generation of consoles that the Dragon Ball license was used properly in a video game. Following the previous 2 Bandai RPGs is yet another pair of Bandai RPGs, based not only on one of Shonen Jump's series, but a mashup of many, Famicom Jump 1 and 2. The first is from 1989 and entitled Eiyu Retsuden, or Hero's History, starring a young boy who's sucked into the world of his weekly Shonen Jump magazine. It's a fairly standard playing action RPG where you can team up with the heroes and battle the villains from the pages of Shonen Jump, making it perhaps the most ambitious crossover of 1989. The 1991 sequel, Saikyo no Shichinin, or The Strongest 7, while similar to Hero's History, ditches the Alice in Wonderland approach and has you control one of 7 of the publication's popular characters on a quest featuring upgraded graphics and better gameplay. It probably goes without saying, but neither of these games left Japanese shores. Breaking the RPG streak is Hokuto no Ken, Fist of the North Star, a 1986 side-scrolling action game from Toei Animation. You can kick, punch, and jump around bland-looking and repetitive levels. This is a notoriously bad game that stayed in Japan, and about the only good thing I can say about it is how it faithfully replicates some of the violence the manga is known for. Oh, and you have the option to suffer with a friend. Thankfully, the other Fist of the North Star game here is a little better, but it removes the action elements completely and, surprise surprise, is a Japanese exclusive RPG. It was a popular genre in the Famicom era. Shinseiki Souzo Seiken Retsuden, creator of the New Century, History of the Dreaded Fist, ooh, what a mouthful, was published in 1989, also by Toei Animation, and is modeled after your typical RPG. But one thing that's neat here are that detailed character portraits represent the heroes and enemies during battle. Near the end of the list of games is Bandai's cute action platformer, Magical Taruruto-kun, Fantastic World, which came out in 1991, never to be localized for other markets. It's nowhere near as enjoyable or polished as the Game Freak's developed Mega Drive Taruruto title released the following year, but this one has charm and plays well enough, though it is quite a bit difficult due to its one-hit death mechanics. I think with just a few tweaks to the controls and game system, this one could have been a classic. Finally, the last game included here, and of course it has to be another role-playing affair, Rokudenashi Blues, a 1993 Bandai offering which is the latest release in the Shonen Jump Famicom Mini, as well as the hardest to find physically. Like most of the RPGs in this set, Rokudenashi Blues has a gimmick to its battle system, which is making the action look like they've come from the pages of the manga. Other than that, it's a small-scale RPG with a lot of personality, and for Japan only. Woo, and that's a look at the hardware and software of the Weekly Shonen Jump 50th Anniversary Classic Mini Famicom Special Edition. Given the context of its release, it probably won't get any additional runs like the other classic minis, so if you want one, you might want to pick it up soon before the price shoots up. It retailed for 7,980 yen plus tax, or about $80 US, and because this will probably be an actual collector's item, I'm sure it'll be hard to find for that amount for much longer. As for if you actually want it, well, I can't say I can recommend picking this up for the games alone, as most of the titles here are some of the cheapest games you can get for the Famicom, like $1 to $5 loose cheap, and the quality of this collection of games doesn't come close to the level achieved by the standard Famicom Mini. In fact, I'd say on average the overall quality of the game library in this system hovers somewhere slightly below mediocre, and much lower if going by today's standards. But for the novelty, or fans of Weekly Shonen Jump or the Famicom, this is a fun and interesting collectible, just don't pay too much for it. Anyway, that's about all I've got this time. I'm Jimmy Hapa from Import Gaming for the Win, thanks for watching and take care.